What happens when Britain's most controversial comedian completely loses his temper on morning television? It only took 42 seconds for a lighthearted chat to explode into an absolute war that ended with Ricky Gervais being kicked off the Lorraine Kelly show in spectacular fashion. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, smash that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, and you definitely don't want to miss what went down on this show. Last night on Lorraine, what was meant to be a friendly promotional appearance turned into one of the most shocking confrontations in British television history. Ricky Gervais, known for his sharp wit and controversial humor, found himself in a heated battle with host Lorraine Kelly that escalated so dramatically, security had to step in and Gervais was ultimately kicked off the set. Ricky Gervais arrived at the studio looking relaxed in his typical casual attire, jeans and a dark shirt, his signature slightly disheveled appearance that he's become famous for over his decades in comedy and entertainment. The 63-year-old comedian settled into the bright sofa across from Lorraine Kelly, who greeted him with her trademark Scottish warmth and that infectious smile that's become iconic across British morning television for decades. "Ricky, lovely to have you here," Lorraine said cheerfully, her accent as warm as ever and immediately putting guests at ease. "You're looking well. How have you been?" "It's been ages since we've had you on," Gervais grinned, that mischievous smile of his already hinting at the sharp wit to come. "I'm doing great, Lorraine. Thanks for having me back. Though I have to say, your sofa is ridiculously comfortable. I might not leave. You might have to call security just to get me out of here." The audience chuckled, and Lorraine laughed along, her eyes crinkling with genuine amusement. "Well, we'll see about that, won't we? Let's talk about your new project first. You've got a special coming out, and I know your fans are absolutely excited about it. What can you tell us?" The conversation began smoothly and naturally, with Lorraine asking about Gervais' creative process, his approach to comedy in the current climate, where everything seems to offend someone, and what audiences could expect from his upcoming work. Gervais was his usual self-witty, self-deprecating, making Lorraine and the audience laugh with his observations about life, fame, getting older, and the absurdities of the entertainment industry. "You've always pushed boundaries with your comedy," Lorraine observed, leaning forward with genuine interest. "You're not afraid to say things that others might shy away from or avoid completely. Where does that fearlessness come from? Were you always like that, even as a kid?" "I don't think it's fearlessness," Gervais explained thoughtfully, gesturing with his hands, as he often does when he's making a point. "I think it's just honesty, really. I say what I think is funny, what I think is true, what I observe in the world around us. If people don't like it, that's fine. That's their right. Comedy shouldn't be safe and predictable. It should make you think, make you uncomfortable sometimes. That's when it's doing its job." "Right. But there's a line, isn't there?" Lorraine said, and there was a subtle shift in her tone that only someone paying close attention would catch. Between being honest and being hurtful? Between making people think and just making them feel bad? Gervais's expression changed slightly, becoming more guarded and less open. "I suppose that depends on who's drawing the line and why they're drawing it there." For the first 15 minutes, they discussed his previous work at length, his massive success with shows like The Office and Afterlife that had millions of viewers, and his evolution as a performer over the years. Gervais shared anecdotes about working with various actors and directors, funny stories from behind the scenes, and the conversation had the relaxed feel of two people who'd known each other in the industry for years and had mutual respect. They talked about how comedy had changed over the decades, about the rise of streaming platforms and what that meant for creative freedom, about the difference between British and American humor. Gervais was engaging and funny, and Lorraine seemed genuinely interested in his responses, laughing at his jokes and nodding along to his observations about the entertainment world. Then Lorraine changed the subject, and the entire atmosphere in the studio shifted dramatically. "Ricky, I want to ask you about something that's been quite controversial lately, Lorraine said, her voice taking on a more serious quality that everyone in the studio could hear. You've made quite a few jokes about trans people in your recent specials, and it's caused quite a stir. A lot of people have found those jokes offensive and hurtful, genuinely hurtful. Do you not think there's a responsibility to be more sensitive about these topics when you have such a huge platform? The question landed heavily in the studio. Gervais sat back, his expression becoming noticeably less friendly, the warmth draining from his face. I've made jokes about everyone, Lorraine. Literally everyone. I don't single anyone out for special treatment. That's the whole point of my comedy. Everyone gets the same treatment, the same scrutiny. But surely you can understand why some people feel targeted? Lorraine pressed gently but firmly, not letting it go. The trans community faces so much discrimination already in their daily lives. When someone with your platform and reach makes jokes at their expense, doesn't that add to their struggles? Doesn't it make their lives harder? I'm not making jokes at their expense, Gervais said, his voice getting a definite edge to it now. I'm making jokes about the placed discourse, about the contradictions in arguments, about the absurdity of some of the debates we're having. There's a difference between those things. Is there? Lorraine asked, tilting her head slightly and maintaining eye contact. Because to many people watching, to many people in these communities, it doesn't feel like there's a difference. It feels like you're punching down at a vulnerable community that's just trying to exist. Gervais laughed, but there was no humor in it whatsoever. Punching down? Lorraine, I've never punched down in my entire career. Never. I make fun of powerful people, of stupid ideas that don't make sense, of hypocrisy wherever I find it. That's what comedy is supposed to do. That's what satire has always done. But when you make jokes about trans women and sports, about pronouns and how people identify, about identity itself, that affects real people who are just trying to live their lives in peace, Lorraine continued, clearly not backing down from this topic. Don't you think that's punching down at people who are already struggling? No, I don't, Gervais said firmly, sitting forward now with intensity. And frankly, I think it's incredibly patronizing to suggest that any group of people can't handle being joked about. That's actually more offensive, treating them like they're too fragile to be included in comedy, like they need special protection. The studio had gone noticeably quiet now. The usual background chatter and movement had stopped as everyone focused on the increasingly tense exchange unfolding in front of them. Lorraine's smile had faded completely, replaced by a more serious, almost concerned expression that showed she wasn't going to let this go. I don't think it's about fragility at all, Lorraine said carefully, choosing her words with precision. It's about the real-world consequences of rhetoric and public discourse. When powerful voices make certain jokes, when they normalize certain attitudes, it can embolden people who genuinely wish harm on these communities. It creates an environment where discrimination becomes acceptable. So, I'm responsible for what other people do? Gervais asked, his voice rising slightly with frustration. That's what you're saying here? That I should censor my comedy because someone somewhere might misinterpret it or use it to justify their own prejudices? I'm saying that words have power, real power, Lorraine replied, maintaining her calm demeanor but with steel underneath it. And with your platform, with your millions of fans around the world, your words have even more power than most. Maybe there's value in considering how those words land, how they're received by different audiences. How they land? Gervais repeated incredulously, shaking his head. Comedy isn't about how things land, it's about truth, about observation, about pushing back against nonsense wherever you find it. If I start worrying about how every single joke lands, with every possible person, in every possible context, I might as well not do comedy at all. But Ricky, surely there's a difference between challenging ideas and mocking people's identities, their very existence, Lorraine persisted, her Scottish accent becoming more pronounced as she got more passionate about the subject. You're one of the most successful comedians in the world. You could choose to use that success to lift people up, instead of making their lives harder with your jokes. Making their lives harder? Gervais's voice was sharp now, cutting. How am I making anyone's life harder by telling jokes on a stage? I'm a comedian, not a politician. I'm not making policy decisions that affect people's lives. I'm performing comedy for people who choose to watch it. Comedy that tells vulnerable people they're ridiculous, that their identities are a joke, Lorraine said quietly but firmly, her eyes not leaving his. Comedy that suggests their experiences are up for debate, mockery. That's the impact, whether you intend it or not, Ricky. Gervais stood up suddenly, the movement sharp and unexpected, startling everyone in the studio, including the camera crew. You know what, Lorraine? I came here to promote my work, to have a nice chat, not to be lectured about morality by someone who thinks they're the arbiter of what's acceptable to say in comedy. The audience gasped collectively, a wave of shock moving through the room. Lorraine looked taken aback, her eyes widening in genuine surprise at his sudden movement and aggressive tone. Ricky, I'm not lecturing you. I'm asking you questions that a lot of people want answers to. Questions that deserve to be asked. Questions? Gervais laughed harshly, the sound bitter and angry. Those weren't questions, those were accusations dressed up as questions. You've decided I'm a bad person because I won't conform to your worldview about what comedy should be, about what's acceptable to joke about. That's not fair at all, Lorraine said, standing up as well now, her voice getting firmer and more assertive. I haven't called you a bad person once. I've asked you to consider the impact of your words on real people's lives. There's a significant difference between those two things. Is there? Gervais shot back, using her own rhetorical device against her. Because it seems to me like you invited me here specifically to try and shame me on your show, on morning television, to paint me as some kind of bigot because I won't bow down to the thought police, because I refuse to censor myself. The thought police? Lorraine's eyebrows rose dramatically. Asking you to be considerate of marginalized people is not thought police, Ricky. It's basic human decency. It's showing empathy for people whose lives are harder than ours. Basic human decency is treating everyone the same, Gervais argued passionately, his voice getting louder with each sentence. Not putting some groups in a special, protected category where they're above criticism or humor or discussion. That's not equality, that's special treatment. That's patronizing. They're not above humor, Lorraine countered, her own volume rising to match his escalating anger. But maybe the humor should come from a place of understanding rather than mockery. Maybe it should come from within communities rather than from wealthy men looking in from the outside and making jokes at their expense. Oh, so now you're the comedy police too? Gervais's voice dripped with sarcasm and contempt, telling people who's allowed to make what jokes about which topics. That's not how comedy works, Lorraine. That's not how free speech works. That's censorship. Free speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences, Lorraine said, and her voice had taken on a lecturing quality now, the kind of tone a teacher might use. You can say whatever you want, but people are also free to call you out when you're being hurtful, when you're causing harm. Hurtful? Gervais laughed bitterly, spreading his arms wide. I've been called every name under the sun by people who disagree with me. I've had death threats, cancel campaigns, people trying to destroy my career, the works. But I'm supposed to be worried about hurting feelings with a joke? That's the priority? Yes, Lorraine said emphatically, her voice rising with genuine passion now. Because jokes normalize attitudes. They shape culture. They tell people what's acceptable to think and say. When you make trans people the punchline of your jokes, you're telling your millions of fans that it's okay to mock them, to see them as ridiculous, to not take them seriously. I'm not making trans people the punchline, Gervais insisted, his face reddening with frustration and anger. I'm making jokes about specific issues, specific contradictions in the discourse, specific absurdities in arguments. If you can't see the difference, if you refuse to see the difference, that's on you, not me. The people who are hurt by your jokes see the difference just fine, Lorraine said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion now, her hands gesturing emphatically. They see a powerful man, with a huge platform, using it to make fun of them, while they're fighting for basic rights and dignity and acceptance. They see someone punching down, fighting for basic rights? Gervais's voice was incredulous, getting louder. We're talking about comedy specials, not legislation. We're talking about jokes, not laws. Get some perspective, Lorraine. Get a grip on reality here. Don't you dare tell me to get perspective, Lorraine said sharply, and now there was real anger flashing in her eyes. I've interviewed people from these communities who've talked about the pain they feel when they see someone like you, someone they might have respected, mocking them on stage for laughs. That's real. That matters. Those are real people with real pain. Of course it's real, Gervais said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. Feelings are real. Emotions are real. But feelings don't dictate what comedy is allowed to be. If we only told jokes that made everyone feel good all the time, we wouldn't have comedy, we'd have propaganda. We'd have approved messaging. That's a ridiculous false choice. Lorraine shot back immediately, not giving him an inch. You can be funny without being cruel. You've done it before in your career. Why can't you do it now? What's changed that makes you think you need to hurt people to get laughs? I'm not being cruel, Gervais shouted, and the studio went dead silent in shock. I'm being honest. I'm saying things that people think but are too afraid to say because of people like you who've decided certain topics are off limits, because of cancel culture and mob mentality. People like me? Lorraine's voice was dangerously quiet now, controlled fury underneath. What exactly do you mean by that, Ricky? I mean people who think they're morally superior because they follow the latest orthodoxy without question, Gervais said, not backing down even an inch. People who think asking questions or making jokes about certain topics makes you a bigot. The self-appointed guardians of acceptable thought and speech. I think asking you to consider the humanity of vulnerable people is not asking too much, Lorraine said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt now. I think suggesting that your jokes might cause real harm to real people is a legitimate concern, not moral superiority. It's empathy. And I think you're full of shit, Gervais said, and the profanity landed like a bomb in the morning television environment, echoing through the shocked silence. The audience gasped loudly, some people actually standing up in shock. Lorraine's mouth fell open in complete disbelief. The crew behind the cameras looked at each other with wide eyes, clearly unsure what protocol was for this situation, whether to keep filming or cut away. Excuse me? Lorraine said, her voice barely above a whisper, but cutting through the silence like a knife through butter. You heard me perfectly well, Gervais said, not apologizing or backing down even slightly, doubling down instead. You invited me here under the pretense of a friendly chat, a nice promotional interview, and instead you ambushed me with moral grandstanding and accusations. You're using your show as a platform to lecture me about how I should do comedy, and I'm absolutely not having it. I invited you here to answer questions that your work raises, Lorraine defended, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment now. Questions that people want answered. If you can't handle being asked about the impact of your words, maybe you shouldn't be saying them in the first place. Or maybe you shouldn't be inviting guests on your show just to attack them and ambush them with loaded questions, Gervais countered sharply. What is this? Some kind of performance for your woke audience? Make yourself look good by making me look bad? Score some points with the Twitter mob? Woke? Lorraine's voice rose sharply, her Scottish accent getting thicker. Is that what we're calling basic compassion and human decency now? Being woke? Caring about people's feelings and well-being is woke? I'm calling it performative moral posturing, Gervais said, his voice cold and cutting. You don't actually care about trans people or anyone else. You care about being seen to care. You care about your image as the nice Scottish lady who stands up for the vulnerable on her morning show. Well, congratulations, Lorraine. You've made your point. You've had your little moment. Get off my show, Lorraine said suddenly, her voice shaking with emotion, tears visible in her eyes now. If you're going to be this disrespectful, this dismissive of real people's pain, you can leave right now. Get out. With pleasure, Gervais said, already reaching for his microphone and pulling it off roughly. I should have known this was a setup from the start. You lot are all the same. So desperate to prove your moral credentials that you'll stab anyone in the back who doesn't agree with you, who doesn't conform to your worldview. I haven't stabbed anyone in the back, Lorraine protested, her voice cracking slightly with emotion. I asked you legitimate questions that your fans and critics both want answered. That's my job as an interviewer. You ambushed me, Gervais said flatly, pulling off his microphone and letting it drop onto the sofa with a thud. There's a difference between asking questions in good faith and launching an attack disguised as concern. You chose the latter because it makes better television. Because your work is harmful, Lorraine said, losing her composure completely now, her voice breaking. Because people are getting hurt by the attitudes you're promoting with your jokes, and someone needs to say it to your face. Someone needs to call you out. Harmful? Gervais laughed incredulously, shaking his head. Comedy is harmful now? Jokes are harmful? Do you hear yourself, Lorraine? You sound absolutely mental. You've lost all perspective on what actually matters in the world. Don't you dare call me mental, Lorraine said, her voice rising to a near shout, tears streaming down her face now, her composure completely shattered. Don't you dare dismiss my concerns as hysteria or madness or irrationality. This is about real people facing real discrimination every single day of their lives. Then maybe take it up with the people actually discriminating instead of attacking comedians for telling jokes, Gervais shot back fiercely, his voice cutting. Or is that too hard? Is it easier to go after me because I won't fight back by calling you a bigot or a transphobe or any other label? Security, Lorraine called out, her voice breaking with emotion. Please escort Mr. Gervais off the set now. Don't bother with that, Gervais said, holding up his hand dismissively toward where security might come from. I'm leaving of my own free will. This has been an absolute joke, and not the funny kind. You should be ashamed of yourself, Lorraine, genuinely ashamed of this performance. I should be ashamed? Lorraine's voice was incredulous, almost laughing with disbelief. You're the one who came on my show and swore at me on live television, called me full of shit, dismissed legitimate concerns as moral posturing and virtue signaling. If anyone should be ashamed of their behavior here, it's you, Ricky. I have nothing to be ashamed of, Gervais said coldly, already walking toward the exit with purpose. I tell jokes. I make people laugh. I challenge ideas and question orthodoxies. You're the one trying to police speech and shut down discussion. History won't be kind to your side of this debate, Lorraine. Mark my words. My side is the side of compassion and understanding, Lorraine called after him, her voice shaking. What's your side? The side of cruelty dressed up as honesty? Gervais stopped at the edge of the set and turned back, his face a mixture of anger and contempt. My side is the side of free expression and refusing to be bullied into silence by people who think their feelings give them the right to control what others say. And I'll take that side any day over your performative sensitivity. Then take it off my show, Lorraine said, pointing toward the exit. Go on. Leave. Take your controversial jokes and your persecution complex with you. Persecution complex? Gervais' voice rose one more time, echoing through the studio. You just spent 20 minutes attacking me on your show, ambushing me with loaded questions, and then kicked me off when I pushed back and defended myself. If anyone has a complex here, it's you. You can't handle anyone disagreeing with your narrow worldview, your rigid ideology. Get out, Lorraine shouted, and now there were tears streaming down her face, whether from anger or hurt or both. her voice breaking completely. "Just get out! I don't want to see you anymore." "Already gone," Gervais said with finality. And with that, he turned on his heel and walked off the Lorraine show, leaving the host standing alone on her set, breathing heavily and visibly shaken, her carefully applied makeup streaked with tears. The audience sat in stunned silence, completely unsure whether to applaud or boo, or simply sit in the uncomfortable quiet that had descended. Lorraine stood there for a long moment, her hands trembling visibly, before a producer finally spoke urgently in her ear, and they cut to an abrupt commercial break. As Ricky Gervais disappeared through the studio doors, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the shocked silence, everyone present knew they'd just witnessed something extraordinary and terrible. A complete breakdown in civility between two people who, moments before, had seemed like friendly colleagues, now revealed to have fundamentally incompatible views on what comedy should be and where the line between humor and harm truly lies.